This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 425, Modernizing Drupal 10 Theme Development. On today's show, we are talking about a new Drupal book, Modernizing Drupal 10 Theme Development, what's new in Drupal 10 theming, and tools that can help speed up theming with guest Luca Lusso. We'll also cover Admin Dialogs as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Luca Lusso. Luca is a Drupal developer with more than 15 years of experience. He worked as a consultant and contributed to building some of the biggest Drupal websites in Italy. Luca is also a teacher and has taught Drupal to many different teams, from universities to big system integrators. And he is an open source lover and Drupal contributor. He maintains popular modules such as Web Profiler and Monologue, and also speaks at conferences such as DrupalCon Europe and Drupal Developer Days. Lately, he's been shifting his interest to front-end performance. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are Melissa Bent, Principal Software Engineer at Red Hat. Melissa has been working with Drupal since 2008. She leads the planning and architecture of the Drupal-driven portions of Red Hat's customer portal. She lives in Nampa, Idaho, on a small farm with her chickens, goats, and dogs, and loves all things IoT, 3D printing, and plants. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be here.
Also joining us, a treat, Stephen Cross, founder at Talking Drupal. Welcome back to the show. Good to have you here.
Hey, happy to be here, as always.
Evolve Drupal is happening on November 28th. Here's Suzanne to tell us a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Dergacheva, co-founder of Evolving Web, and here to let you know about Evolve Drupal. It's an event coming up in Ottawa on November 28th. We have a great lineup of speakers and interactive sessions about Drupal. The goal of the event is to challenge you to use Drupal in more innovative ways. There's going to be talks about design and content and case studies from real-world projects. And you'll learn about the future of Drupal and how to stay innovative. So far, we have folks joining us from government, public sector, higher ed, nonprofit, and other organizations that are using Drupal. We'd love to see you there, and you can get all the details at evolvedrupal.com.
Thanks, Suzanne. And now to talk about our module of the week is a guest, because Martin, I think, is at Aqua Engage. So let's turn it over to Jacob Rockowitz, maintainer of the web form and schema.org blueprints modules. Jake, what do you have for us this week?
I would like to talk about the Admin Dialogs module. I'm really excited. This is one of the modules I installed and was super excited when I saw that it just worked as I expected. And the pitch for the module is Admin Dialogs module basically takes your links and opens links that go to simple forms and modal dialogues. For example, when you need to delete something, the delete confirmation just says, "Are you sure you want to delete this?" And it has a delete button. And instead of making someone go to a whole new page, they can open that modal dialog and click delete. And the module provides a UI that you can adjust any link on your site in any context to open in a modal dialog. And out of the box, it ships with default settings for almost any common task. The most common one is deleting. The other one, and what's great is as you're using Drupal, you just see it's making things a little better. Another example is when you're adding menu links, it opens the menu links in a dialog, which it makes a lot of sense. You just need to enter a title URL and maybe some minor settings. I really like the module. The quick background of the module is that it was just created in May 2003. It was created by Minor, who works for Chapter 3. It is in a 1.0 release. It has a 1.0.17 release from last July. It has only 6 issues. Only 150 sites are using it. There's no test coverage, but I'm not concerned about that because the module is so simple in what it does that it's usually is easy to manually test because basically you're going to links and seeing that they open in a modal dialog. There's one experimental feature that I also want to call out where it adds a loading spinner. When you click submit on a form, it replaces the text, the submit button, with a loading spinner. It's a very nice feature for forms that might take a second to return back a response. And it's just experimental, so you have to turn that on. I think that's enough to discuss. What else would you guys like to talk about this module?
Yeah, this sounds like one of those really helpful little modules because those page loads add up. you can kind of handle, if you can kind of handle that stuff in one load, it makes it simpler. I guess one question is, how is it using the dialogue? How is it handling the dialogues from a mobile or an accessibility standpoint? Do you know if it's just using?
Well, it's all core. So it's a very simple module. What it's doing is going into links and taking Drupal's modal API and saying, open this in a modal. And I think they all default to like 550 pixels wide. And for mobile, it's fine. What happens in mobile is it just resizes down to a reasonable screen with an X in the upper right-hand corner with submit buttons at the bottom. So and that's been, all the modals are from core, so the accessibility is there, the testing's been there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, ironically, it is more of a, it doesn't reduce page load, because when you click open modal, it does hit the server, get the content, and put it on the page.
Yeah.
But the user experience is so much cleaner. I don't know what we call that. It's not the act of the server, but the user experience is page load. Like, and the key thing with like delete's a great example is you click delete, sometimes you want to close it, and this reduces clicking the back button or anything like that. This pattern, I view, people do use this pattern occasionally, but this is bringing it fully into core for like multiple systems. Easy to uninstall too, if you don't like what it's doing, or customize it, which I do.
This is actually something that's always annoyed me, is that the delete form's on a separate page, because first off, there's a little bit of fear, I think, when people are first using Drupal. When you hit delete, it's like, is it just going to delete it? And like, bye, like you're done. Especially if your site tends to take a little while to respond. So this kind of like more immediate and also more modern approach, right? A lot of people are used to this kind of behavior, that it solves a problem for me. I definitely like this a lot better than what core does. I'm wondering, this is a side note, but years ago, a friend of mine, we were working with views a lot, and we were doing, when you set up a brand new site and you like have to set up all the views or something, and you're just like installing fields and doing things like config changes. He discovered that if you click the X instead of cancel, then it doesn't trigger a form action. It just closes the modal, versus if you hit cancel, then it goes through the whole like form submit action, so it's slower. So if you just hit the X, it closes the modal, but if you hit cancel, then it takes a second and then it closes. I'm wondering, since it uses core, if it does the same thing. Not that it doesn't.
It's literally, it's a layer, which is great to say. It's like a layer that just takes a link and opens it in a modal, and whatever core is going to do, or whatever the form's configured to do. Because, for example, I just want to say, like on the delete form, there's sometimes you can put a cancel link back to it, and that will it actually will reload the page to cancel. I mean, that's the X is the best way to close a dialogue, and the escape button works too, which is nice accessibility. But it's just a nice layer. It's very similar to the admin toolbar where you install, and it just makes your life easier.
I think it's funny because we talked about this slightly last week about something else where like modals seem to be making a comeback in Drupal. Like I remember in Drupal 7, one of the first things I always did is uninstall the overlay module. I hated it. It was so painful. But now, like with this and the new in Drupal 10, I don't know if it was 10.1 or 10.0, but the new like add field or add existing field modal on content or on entities, like it's just so much nicer. And it's funny that it's kind of full circle. Now they found a way to cleanly implement it, and as long as it's accessible, I'm all for it. I'll have to check this module out. I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases I would install it on every new site. An existing site, it's changing the UX, so you got to prepare your users for that.
Yeah,
because it's minor. It's like changing the admin theme. Suddenly people are like, "What just happened?" You're like, "Well, we're trying to make it better." But and it works very well in Gin and all the other, because all the admin themes are working well with modals at this point. Oh, and I forgot to call out this little thing. It also offers to open things in a sidebar, the black sidebar that Drupal has, the off tray. It supports the off canvas tray. It supports that too. So there's a good opportunity for people to think about it. I tend to like the modal better because it's just simpler, but it's really versatile. It's like a Swiss Army knife for controlling these modals or actions on links.
I think that I would say off canvas for me is usually when you have more stuff than just a button to click, right? You need the space or you need the screen real estate, versus a modal, which is like more like a CTA, We're just like, here's the one action that we want you to do. But no, I like this. This is a cool, simple module that solves an irritation of mine that I've had since I first started using Drupal.
And it's the right solution. I got to say, it just works. You install it and that's it. You don't, and it's not something that should go into core. And frankly, if core was trying to track all the modals, it would get overwhelmed. Okay. And this is the right approach. Contrib should enhance core.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Jacob, for great module of the week. And
I appreciate
see you this weekend.
Okay. See you this weekend. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so let's jump into our primary topic. So Modernizing Drupal 10 Theme Development is a book that you wrote, Luca. So can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to write a book about Drupal theming?
I always want to write a book because being a teacher and explaining Drupal to people, having something written is useful. But it's complex to write a book because you have to have time to decide the title, the topics. Then I never started by myself. Then last year, the Pact contacted me about for writing this a book about Drupal theming, and I accepted because. It's one of my dream. The topic, the theming is not my primary point of interest. I'm more a backend developer, but I think that it's interesting. It was an interesting opportunity to explore. How Drupal backend or Drupal theming works in depth. So I accepted this task. Also because at that moment there not exist any Drupal about any books about Drupal 10 theming. So it has been a good opportunity to write one.
Luca, I'm fascinated by your comment that you're a back-end developer and you're writing a book about theming, and we can get to that. That's really interesting to me because I sit where you sit, right? Theming is the last thing I generally do in a project, and probably the thing I'm not best at. So this might be a book that I might be purchasing by the end of the day. But the title of the book is Modernizing Drupal 10 Theme Development. Yeah. So I'm curious as to how does this book modernize Drupal 10 theming?
Yes. First of all, I try to start to simulate, let's say, what a typical workflow happens in a Drupal agency. Because usually, or in my experience, someone in the organization or externally provides you with a design system with all the graphics and the layout and so on. Then someone in your organization probably will build up the Drupal theme, the Drupal module, Drupal site, with all the configuration, modules, building, and so on. And then you, as a themer, receive a Drupal website on your hand, a design system on another end, and you have to implement the Drupal theme. So I start by providing the reader of the book with a storybook implementation of all the design system, with all the components implemented using storybook, and with the Tailwind CSS as style sheet library. And then starting from this point, the reader will discover how to use GitHub actions to implement continuous integration for testing, like visual regression, or linting and styling and fixing CSS and JavaScript. Then using backstop JS to do visual regressions. So all stuff that are used normally by a front-end developer, but maybe not usually used by a Drupal teamer. Because usually a Drupal teamer is someone that does Drupal and then builds the front end, and it's difficult to take someone from the pure front end field and ask him to build a Drupal team, because they uses a lot of modern tools like Webpack, Byte, Tailwind, Storybook, and so on.
So the word modernize doesn't just talk about the JavaScript in the front end. It's also it's really the full development process in terms of the theming. Yeah. Thank you.
So who's the audience then for this book? Is it a Drupal themer or Drupal developer looking to theme, or is it somebody that is a front-end developer that has been tasked with converting something to a Drupal theme?
Yes, here is basically for both. So if you are a front-end developer that has never used Drupal, you can find in the first chapters of the book all the basic concept about Drupal, like node entities, blocks, views, and then you can start by understanding how Drupal works and how to provide a theme for Drupal, but also for Drupal themer that can discover a lot of new information, and for Drupal backend developers that probably can understand how a Drupal themer works, and then how to provide information and how to simplify the life of a Drupal themer, basically.
So with this modernization effort and all these tools, I remember when, my first introduction to web development was actually JavaScript, and I was changing forms and things like that. And then I ended up going into back-end Drupal development as well. And by the time I came back and started looking at front end again, it's like, what is all of this? So there's, there are all the steps and all the libraries, and the joke of that if you type JS in any random word into Google, there's probably a library named that. There's so many different libraries out there. So with that idea, when you wrote this, did you write it for a certain level of experience? Like, is it for newcomers to Drupal? Is it for mid-level, maybe experienced people? Like, who would you say this was written for when it comes to the level of experience?
Okay, about Drupal knowledge, probably you can start from scratch. So it doesn't matter if you know Drupal. Probably it's better if you know something about front-end development. So how to install a npm package or how to configure Webpack. But I'm in the GitHub repository of the book. I provide a full implementation of a demo website with all the build scripts to set up a local environment, spin off the theme, all the required JavaScript and CSS libraries, everything. So it's built on DDev. So I provide some DDev commands to start the website, start the theme, everything that probably you don't have to know a lot of things about how front end nowadays works. I explain in the book all the steps, but they are already implemented in the demo website. So you can just start the theme part of a Drupal website.
Are there any because Drupal 10, right? Hot topic. It's November, so Drupal 10 is like everyone's pushing for Drupal 10 if they haven't already. They should have already. So with this theming work you've done, and I mean, amazing groundwork, by the way. That's really awesome that you provide so much for the sample or the demo website for people to work on. Do you touch on new aspects that Drupal 10 provides? Since you talked about how this is kind of an open space right now for Drupal 10, that there aren't theming books specific to Drupal 10 yet. Are there pieces of Drupal 10 that you talk about specifically in this book?
Yes. First of all, the new starter kit way of building themes on Drupal. So you are not extend a theme from a stable or something like that, but you fork a starter kit theme. So the book explain this way of building a new theme on Drupal 10. And then the other big topic of Drupal 10 is the single directory components. The problem is that when I wrote the book in November 2022, all those stuff about single directory components is not was not in the core, because it has been committed in Drupal 10.1. So I have to basically rewrote a couple of chapters to take this new way of building a theme in Drupal 10. So the first half of the book uses those components provided in a storybook instance using twig.js, for example, to compile twigs and so on. And in one of the latest chapter, I dedicate a full chapter, in effect, to single directory components. So to explain how to use it, how to leverage this new way of build Drupal theme.
Awesome.
Do you address any JavaScript frameworks in your book?
No. Basically, all the JavaScript provided by the demo website and the demo theme uses Drupal JavaScript only. So for the standard theme, because the first part of the book is explaining how to build a Drupal theme in a standard way using Twig and so on. In that part, I only use the JavaScript provided by Drupal.
That makes sense to me.
I have a similar question, which I think will be answered in the same way. One of the things, if you listen for our listeners of the show, it's something I've been talking about for a while, and it's something that new projects I'm really pushing, and that's using native JavaScript web components for a lot of the technology, a lot of the front end. And one of the reasons is it works really well with Storybook, and it makes the integration side really easy, because the JavaScript web components are essentially just HTML. So if you get the right template, you just write the HTML and it just works. There's no really, with some exceptions, there's no really fighting with the Drupal markup in order to get things to work. So does your book address native web components in any way as far as like a theming tool or not?
No. That part is not it's not explained.
Again,
I'm not a big expert in native web components. So
that's fine. Like Steven said, I think that makes sense. I mean, if you're approaching it from kind of the standard Drupal process, I think native web components and JavaScript frameworks are a little bit more advanced, but makes sense.
But it does lead to the question of what tools outside of Drupal, if any, do you cover in the book? And it sounds like you touched on a few of them. You did mention Storybook early on. So what are the other tools or things that people would be implementing in covering your book?
Yes, basically Storybook and Chromatic, that is the company behind the Storybook, that provides a website when you can push your components and then share it share them to other developers in the team. So in the book, you set up this connection with the chromatic instance to share your component. Okay. So that part for the and the design systems also uses Tailwind CSS. That is not a tool, but it's something that is not usually used by a Drupal teamer. Then I use for example, GitHub Actions to implement all the continuous integration pipelines and checks and so on. The dev, like for the local development stack, based on Docker. Then
you also mentioned visual regression too earlier.
Yes, I use this tool called Backstop.js. That is a easy to use visual regression tool where you can provide screenshots of the website in any point of time, and he compares previous version with the next one for visual regression issues. I also add this step on the CI pipeline. So if you commit something that broke some aspect of the visual of the site, the build notifies you. I use browser sync, for example. That is very useful for. It is common in the front end world to change something on the code and have the browser reloads immediately to see the new changes.
Hey, Luca, I'm curious, if someone doesn't use Storybook and they're reading your book, does it impact the value of reading your book? Does someone need to be using Storybook in order to move on, or do they need to be using any visual regression tools?
All the examples are based on components that comes from Storybook, but they basically are twig files that you include in your templates. So you don't have to spin up an instance of Storybook to be able to do that, because the components are simply twig files that you can use. I simplify the process by using Tailwind CSS, in the sense that you don't have a CSS file to include from the components, because all the rules comes from Tailwind. So this is probably simpler than a typical use case where when you have components that have a twig and some style sheet. But basically, this is not a book about front-end development. It's a book about how to implement a Drupal theme. So I simplify some part.
Yeah, Drupal theme. Drupal is one of those areas where Drupal theme is like a special title, right? Just like site builder and backend developer. So you mentioned that you are primarily a backend developer, as I think everybody on this call is at the moment. And I all of us have some experience with theming on some level as well. But I'm curious, how did you kind of conduct your research writing about front end stuff? How did you test that, and how did you make sure that you were essentially giving the right steps and right advice? Like how did that process work?
Yes, I read a lot of other books and blog posts and so on. I do a lot of questions to the teaming team in my company to understand how a Drupal teamer works and what information needs to understand all the process. Also, the reviewers of the book were very proactive and helped me to rewrite probably some chapters or some information to be more useful for teamers. They are both Drupal teamers.
So what are your plans to keep the Git repository updated?
Yes, I will try to update it. Also because some readers are started to open issues and also pull requests to the repository. That is very very helpful to me because I understand how users interact with the demo website. Mm-hmm. So I definitely plan to keep the repository updated.
I have to say, as somebody who uses Storybook and uses Docker extensively, both professionally and in my hobby, I'm definitely interested in kind of looking at this and seeing how you set up Storybook in Docker, because the way I do my personal development, everything is in DDEV, everything is in Docker, except for Storybook, because I find that there's just so many files that need to be updated. I mean, I'm not on a Mac, but the people that I work with that do the theming side of it usually are, and I find that having all those, even with mutagen, having all those files in there, it just slows down a little bit. But I'm definitely sorry. There isn't a question here. I was just looking at the repository and noticed
Nick,
it.
Yeah. So Nick, if you're not running Storybook and DDEV, what are you running it in?
I run it. The only thing I have installed on my computer is VS Code, Docker, and Node, so I can run npm like directly.
So you're running Node locally.
Yeah.
For Storybook.
Yeah, it's just so much faster.
Okay. Why? Well, we're getting off track here, but why would it be faster for it to be running locally instead of in Docker?
Because all the file updates don't have to be transmitted back to Docker.
Oh, sorry, but you're running on Linux, so it should be super fast, right?
The people I work with aren't usually running on Linux. Like the people that are developing in Storybook, like the front end designers and developers, they're usually not in Linux. They're using a Mac.
Okay. In my experience developing the demo website on a Mac, I don't have seen any slowdown, but my project is not big enough, probably like a real production example. On Linux, I have another problem. Also, some readers have this problem with the permissions, right permission of the cache on the cache directory that we haven't resolved yet. So also Linux, it's not so user-friendly for Storybook on Docker developers.
I'm maybe I'll take a look at that because I'm interested in that. But yeah, Steven, he kind of answered my question that like normally the people I work with aren't on Linux, unfortunately. So just to make it easier for them, I just leave it out. And they're used to looking at the package JSON to find out what the commands are. But if you said that you didn't run into issues, Luca, maybe I'll test it again and see if it works, because if I can remove that dependency from my computer, if all I need is just Docker and VS Code, that makes, in browsers and things like that, right? But that's cleaner and that's easier to manage. But it's been a couple of years since I looked at that, so things might have changed.
So I dabble in writing books myself, and I've never actually completed one, which kudos to you for completing one as well. But you mentioned that you started writing it before 10.1 came out, and I looked that up, and because I didn't remember when that happened. So that was June of this year, earlier this year, that was released, like the official version of 10.1. So when did you start writing it, and like about how long do you think it took you to finish the process?
I started in November in 2022, and I completed it in August of this year. So 9 months. It's 350 pages.
Wow.
So when you say finished, though, was that like meaning you sent it to Pact, or did you have it done before that because you talked about how you had like beta readers?
The process is more complex. I delivered each chapter to Pact when it is finished, one after the other. So they do the copy editing, technical review, chapter by chapter. And this is complex because you have you cannot edit a previously written chapter. So it's complex because you forgot something in a previously written chapter. You have to adapt the next one to overcome this. Because once the chapter is copy edited, formatted, and it's ready to be printed, basically. You cannot edit it back.
It's like a content freeze, kind of like code freeze, but a content freeze. You can't do any more commits against that previous chapter. You're like
months in advance. That's wild.
Gosh.
That it's
so
wild.
I don't exactly at the beginning. I don't had the time to plan all the text, basically. So I just wrote the title of the chapters, a description of every chapter, and that's it. Because it took 3 weeks until I start the contract with Pact, and then when I start writing the first chapter. So in effect, it's complex because maybe at chapter 14, you remember that in chapter 1 you have to say something, and you cannot do that anymore.
Wow.
Hey, I'm curious here. Does Pact provide you technical editors that review that are knowledgeable about Drupal and Twig, or is that something that's on your side, or are they just providing editorial editors here about language?
They provide all the copywriting editors that checks for the English and the grammars and so on. They asked me to provide one technical reviewer.
Okay.
They provide another technical reviewer, so we have 2 technical reviewers that check all the code, all the text, and so on. But all the layout and editing part was in charge of Pact.
Okay. So technology moves quickly, including Drupal. I mean, maybe Drupal doesn't move as quickly as JavaScript frameworks, but what's the shelf life of this book? I mean, how long do you think it'll be relevant for people looking to get started in Drupal?
Okay, probably for the specific topic, the release. I don't know about the front end, the theme layer of Drupal, which are the new features that are planned for the next releases. Probably for all the Drupal 10 life cycle, the code is relevant. But probably what I try to do with the book is to teach how Drupal does things. So basically, why Drupal do things in this way. For example, one of the first chapter is all about how Drupal builds pages, starting from the request, all the layers in Drupal, until the renders array and so on, and how the theme is produced. And this probably will still relevant.
That's a good point.
Probably for, I don't know, forever, but for a long time. So if you understand why Drupal is done this way and how Drupal works internally, if some new features will come out, probably it will use the same concept, basically. Or will, for example, single directory components is using renders arrays, Twig templates file, all information that it's the same in the all other levels of layers of Drupal.
So are there plans already for future editions, like for Drupal 11 or 10.2 or etc.?
At this point, no. We are not talking about a new release of the book and so on. Probably, if some new features will come out in the next version, I will update maybe the demo repository. I will write some blog post about that topic, but not a new release of the book. It's planned. We published it on August, so it's 3 months that is published. So probably next year, I don't know.
Okay. So I see that Pact is the publisher. Is there an advantage to purchasing this book through Pact versus Amazon?
No, basically it's the same. Also, the price is the same. So you can buy it on the Pact website or on Amazon.
I did notice on Amazon that if you purchase the I think it said the Kindle edition, you could also get an ebook emailed to you. Is that normal? Is that something Pact does?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I have a question about translation. One of the things about technical documentation is a lot of it's in English. Are there plans for Pact to translate this into other languages, for example, Italian?
No, probably doesn't make much sense because the Drupal community in Italian is too small.
So the other side of that question is, I guess, more of a, not as an author, but more as like as a fellow developer, is that I'm curious how you handle this, documentation being in another language.
Probably documentation, having English documentation is normal, at least here in Italy. So it's quite common to don't have documentation written in your language. There is probably no one wrote also technical blogs and technical articles. Also here in Italy, no one wrote them in Italian because. Really? Usually the developers are confident with reading documentation in English.
So if you don't mind, I'm curious about that, because I'm wondering, like, if there's, one of the things we've been talking about on the show recently is, helping expand the community, especially from a technical side, right? The Drupal community is very inclusive, but, there's been a lot of talk and strategy about how do we get new developers? How do we get junior developers interested in Drupal? And I'm just curious if, that's one of those aspects, right? Because that's a big barrier to entry, right? Do you have any thoughts on, an initiative that would make this type of thing more available?
Yes, probably if you are a developer, you have to at least understand the technical documentation written in English. Of course, if you can provide in this case Italian documentation, maybe you will have more developers that can jump on the community because outside of companies probably or university, probably English documentation can be a problem for people that want to maybe not develop for Drupal, but just build websites or use Drupal. For them, having an Italian documentation can be useful. Probably for developers, as everything else is in English always. In any case, probably this not be an issue.
So sorry to continue down this this rabbit hole, but I have one more question too. So one of the things that I know Drupal itself, one of the strengths of the Drupal project is the ability to translate both the interface and the content, right? Or set different languages for the content if you're not translating it. I'm curious if on the projects you work on, do you translate the interface into Italian, or do you just leave that English as well?
It depends on the client. Usually, we translate the interface in Italian.
Okay.
Also the administration interface in
Italian. And do you find that I have had very few projects that have used that feature. Do you find that translation is good, or do you find that you have to kind of tweak that a bit?
Yes, the actual Italian translation for the core of Drupal 10, it's quite good. There are a lot of contrib modules that are typically installed that are not translated in Italian. We, as we with my company, as we provide open contrib modules, we also provide translation when we can. So usually we do that. But the amount of untranslated strings is huge on contrib modules.
Yeah, sorry to go down this rabbit hole, but it's something I've been curious about, and I'm always curious about other people's perspective around that.
Going back to the topic of writing a book, because you talked about how this is something you've always wanted to do, which again, I'm just super impressed, because I know that first off, writing a book at all and getting it done is a big accomplishment. So kudos to you. But also, like, doing a technical book instead of just like necessarily like something that just comes straight from here. It like a fantasy book or whatever kind of novel we might be writing, but like a technical book, I feel like there's more weight on that kind of thing, because people can actually look at it and say, well, that's wrong, or whatever, you know, they're reading it with more, I guess they're reading it more critically. But did you enjoy the experience? Are you thinking about doing another one? Like, would you do another one? I know we've already like kind of asked about different versions about this topic, but just in general, would you do this again, do you think?
At the moment, no, because I spent the last 9 months all every free moment in the night or weekends and so on, writing this book. So at the moment, I don't plan to start another project like this. Also because returning to the English point before, I'm not a native English speaker, so I have to probably wrote a chapter. Then I wrote the book directly in English, but then I check for every sentences to understand if they are correct. So they took a lot of time to do that, and then to avoid as much as possible to write something wrong, I test and try a lot of different solutions for the same topic to understand if this is the correct way to do that, how people think about doing these things in that way. So it was a lot of work.
And so and again, it's like, you're like, I just finished it. Why are you asking if I'm going to write another one? I just finished this one. But having this process fresh in your mind, and you already talked about how packed, like you got one chapter to them at a time and you couldn't change it anymore. Those kinds of processes, what kinds of things would you want to change if you were to do it again? Like, would you want to write it in Italian instead of English? Would you want to, do the whole thing first and then submit it? Like what kinds of things would you, if you could, would you change it about the process?
Yes, probably is this second one. I built the demo website chapter by chapter when writing the chapter itself. Probably if we can do this again, I will set up everything first, and then understand all the part that I need to cover, and then wrote all the text. This probably it's very more helpful.
So write the project. I mean, I think you would have, as somebody who's done stuff like this and tried to document backwards, I think you'd have a similar issue the other way around, though. If you built the whole thing, you'd have to make sure you didn't forget any steps either. But I think that makes sense. Spending a little bit more time on the outline might make it more straightforward, and then maybe build it again as you're writing to make sure you don't forget a step. So it sounds like if you're doing a technical book, building the project, making notes, doing the outline, and then as you write chapter by chapter, build that piece of it again from scratch, just to make sure that they're all cohesive and you don't miss a step. Make sense?
Basically, Yes, basically, I complete all the text in August, and then I want to start it again, to rewrite and to fix all the issues I found during but we have to publish it.
So was it more work than you expected? Because you said it's always been your dream to write a book.
Yes, more work than I expected. But it was very amazing, an amazing experience. So
I'd like to ask our listeners if you a way to thank the podcast, or the way to thank people like Luca for doing these kinds of things, go out and buy his book. Go to Amazon, go to Pact, and purchase it. I mean, even if you're already a front-end developer and you may not learn a lot from it, or someone like me who's probably going to learn a ton from it, go out and purchase the book. It's a way of saying thank you for people like Luca or any of our module contributors to go out and do their passion and do their work. Just go out and buy it for them. It's a great way of saying thank you, and to encourage people like Luca to just continue doing these things moving forward. Because we all know that the more Drupal books that are out there, which there aren't many, is really good for the community. So Luca, thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before we close out the show, is there anything that you would like to add for our listeners?
Okay. I don't know.
Buy the book.
Buy the book, of course. The book is this one. Yes, this is the cover. So go to the Amazon website.
Actually, there's actually a question that we usually ask authors that we didn't have in the show notes. Let me ask it now. What was the most surprising thing when you're writing the book that you didn't expect? Like, because obviously you have to do a deeper dive into the source material because you're writing the book, right? You're teaching people. You have to make sure that you understand the core concepts. What's something that you thought maybe you understood or you had never seen before that as you were writing the book, you're like, oh my God, I didn't know Drupal worked like that. Or the front end theming worked like that. What was the most surprising thing that you came across?
The part that I don't know about, I don't know a lot about Drupal theme is all the libraries and overriding stuff about libraries. For example, that you can provide a specific library to style a CK editor on the backend, or you can override and replace single CSS file from one contrib modules. That was a very powerful feature of Drupal theme. And also all the integration between single directory components and all typical component-based workflow. I have to read a lot about that. That was very, very interesting. And the latest chapter of the book talk about the couple front end. So I have to understand about JSON API and REST modules, about how Next for Drupal, for example, works to implement a decoupled front end. There's a lot of things that I don't understand. I don't know because before starting the book.
Okay. Very cool.
I think that's one of my favorite things about this kind of work, right? When you're doing a different kind of problem or doing these kinds of deep dives, is digging into the code itself and looking at how it works. And I mean, I've made all sorts of discoveries in Drupal core that way. I think I mentioned one of them when I was on last time about how you can add indexes onto config files, and it's already there. Indexes meaning for the database itself. So I thought that was like, I love those kinds of things because you're like, did you know it did this? Did you know it did this? It just, in my mind, it makes me more excited about using it because there's all this stuff that you didn't necessarily know about.
Exactly. Another point is that one of the module I maintain is a web profiler that usually extract information from Drupal and show you a lot of data that it collects when a page is built. And I extend the module itself during during I wrote the book to extract other information more useful for themers. So, for example, I never think that listing all the libraries used on a page can be useful. Wrote in the book, I discovered that maybe having a list of the Drupal libraries that is used on a page can be useful. So I extend the features of Web Profiler to include all those information. Also because I use a lot of data from the Web Profiler module in the book to explain why a page is built that way.
How did we miss that you were a maintainer of Web Profiler? How did we miss that?
Well, Nick,
I mean, that's a module I install and use all the time.
Well, and Monologue as well. We use that all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
If you have any questions or feedback, reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or you could email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts or listeners on the Drupal Slack channel, Talking Drupal.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about the guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose the Become a Patron button. Okay, as we get ready to close out the show, Luca, if our listeners had any questions for you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can write me on Twitter or Slack, on the Slack channel of the Drupal Association, or on the GitHub issue queue of the book, for example. Lusso Luca, that is my last name and first name, and is the same username everywhere on Drupal.org, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere.
Awesome. And Melissa, if listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
For me, I'm on Twitter as well. I'm on Drupal.org. I'm on the Drupal Slack as well. And my handle on there is Meraluka, MERAULUKA, which is, and I say this every time, it's a throwback to AOL. It was my screen name on AOL when I was like 12, and it just stuck.
And Stephen, how about you?
Melissa, my parents still have AOL email addresses. You can find me, Stephen Cross with a PH, pretty much anywhere.
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
See you guys next week.